This is Black Wall Street Chronicles, and we're back at it again. Thank you for listening to my podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk about the history of assassination attempts on American presidents. What inspired me to do this podcast that on July 13th, 2024, there was an assassination attempt on former President Trump. And a lot of people believe it's the hoax. I'm going to tell you that it's not true. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use previous assassination attempts on previous presidents to prove my opinion. All right, so first, we're going to talk about the successful assassination attempts. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, was the first U.S. president to be assassinated. The assassination took place on Good Friday, April 14, 1864, at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. at about 10:15 p.m. The assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was a known actor and Confederate sympathizer for Maryland. Though he never joined the Confederate Army, he had contacts with the Confederate Secret Service. In 1864, Booth formulated a plan very similar to the one of Thomas N. Conrad, previously authorized by the Confederacy, to kidnap Lincoln in exchange for the release of Confederate prisoners. After attending an April 11, 1865 speech in which Lincoln promoted voting rights for black people, Booth decided to assassinate the president instead. Learning that the president would be attending Ford's Theater, Booth formulated a plan with the co-conspirators to assassinate Lincoln at the theater, as well as Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward at the homes. Lincoln intended to play Our American Cousins at Ford Theater. As the president sat in his state box in the balcony, watching the play with his wife Mary and two guests, Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Sierra Harris, Booth entered from behind. He aimed a .44 caliber Derringer pistol at the back of Lincoln's head and fired, mortally wounding him. Rathbone momently grappled with Booth, but Booth stabbed him and escaped. An unconscious Lincoln was examined by doctors and taken across the street to the Presbyterian house. After he remained in a coma for 9 hours, Lincoln died 7:22 a.m. on April 15th. As he died, his breathing grew quieter, his face more calm. According to some accounts, at his last breath on the morning after the assassination, he smiled broadly, then expired. Historians, particularly Arthur Lee Davis, had emphasized Lincoln's peaceful appearance when and after he died. It was the first time in 4 years probably that a peaceful expression crossed his face, Phil wrote in a letter to the New York Times. There was no apparent suffering, no convulsive action, no rattling of the door, only a mere cessation of breathing. I never seen upon the president's face of expression more genial and pleasing. The president's secretary, John Hay, saw a look of unspeakable peace came upon his worn features. Beyond Lincoln's death, the plot failed. Seward was only wounded, and Johnson would be attacked or did not follow through. After being on the run for 12 days, Brooks was tracked down and found on April 26, 1864, by Union Army soldiers at a farm in Virginia, some 70 miles south of Washington. After refusing to surrender, Booth was fatally shot by Union cavalryman Buster Colbert. 4 other conspirators was later hanged for their roles in the conspiracy. James A. Garfield. The assassination of James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, began at the Baltimore Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. at 9:20 a.m. on Saturday, July 2, 1881. Less than 4 months after he took office, as the president was arriving at the train station, writer and lawyer Charles J. Couture shot him twice with a .44 Wembley British Bulldog revolver. One bullet grazed the president's shoulder and the other pierced his back. For the next 11 weeks, Garfield endured the pain and suffering for having been shot, before dying on September 19, 1881 at 10:35 p.m. Complications caused by intraneogenic infections, which were contracted by the doctor's relentless probing of his womb with unsterilized fingers and instruments. He had survived for a total of 79 days before being shot. Guteau was immediately arrested. After a highly publicized trial lasting from November 14, 1881 to January 25, 1882, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. A subsequent appeal was objected, and he was executed by hanging on June 30, 1882, in the District of Columbia, 2 days before the first anniversary of the shooting. Guteau was assessed during his trial and autopsy as mentally unbalanced and suffering from the X of neurosyphilis. He claimed to have shot Garfield out of disappointment as being passed over for an appointment as an ambassador to France. He attributed the president's victory in the election to a speech he wrote in support of Garfield. William McKinley. The assassination of United States President William McKinley took place on 4:07 p.m. on Friday, September 6, 1901, at the Temple of Music in Buffalo, New York. McKinley attended the Pan-American Exposition, was shot twice in the abdomen at close range by Leon Kluzak, an anarchist, was armed with a .32 caliber Iver Johnson safety automatic revolver that was concealed underneath a handkerchief. The first bullet ricocheted off of a button of a war medal on Kingley's jacket and lodged into his sleeve. The second shot pierced his stomach. Although McKinley initially appeared to be recovering, his condition rapidly declined due to gangrene setting around his wounds. He died on September 14, 1901. Members of the crowd, started by James Benjamin Parker, subdued and captured Colevis. After the 4th Brigade, National Guard, Signal Ops, and police intervened, beating Colevis so severely it was initially thought he might live to stand trial. On September 24th, after a 2-day trial in which the defendant refused to defend himself, Coles was convicted and later sentenced to death. He was executed by the electric chair in the Auburn prison on October 29, 1901. Coles' actions were politically motivated, although it remains unclear what outcome, if any, he believed the shooting would yield. John F. Kennedy. The assassination of the United States President John Fitzgerald Kennedy took place at 19:30 p.m. on Friday, November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas, during a presidential motorcade in Deasley Plaza. Kennedy was riding with his wife Jacqueline, Texas Governor John Connally, and Connally's wife Nellie, when he was fatally shot by former U.S. Marine and American defector Lee Harvey Oswald using a 6.5 by 52 millimeter Cardinal Mile .38 rifle from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. He was shot once in the back, the bullet exited his throat, and once in the head. Governor Connally was seriously wounded, and bystander James Tock received a minor facial injury from a small piece of cumberstone that fragmented after it was struck by one of the bullets. The motorcade rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where President Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. Oswald was arrested and charged by the Dallas Police Department for the assassination of Kennedy under the murder of Dallas policeman J.D. Tippit, who was shot dead in a racial neighborhood in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. Just hours later, on Sunday, November 24th, while being transferred to the city jail to the county jail, Oswald was fatally shot in the basement of Dallas Police Department headquarters by Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby. Ruby was convicted of Oswald's murder, albeit his conviction was later overturned in an appeal. In 1967, Ruby died in prison while awaiting a new trial. In September 1964, the Warren Commission concluded that Kennedy and Tippit were both killed by Oswald, that Oswald had acted entirely alone in both motives, and that Ruby had acted alone in killing Oswald. Nonetheless, polls conducted from 1966 to 2004 found out that 80% of the Americans surveyed had suspected that there was a plot or cover-up to kill President Kennedy. Conspiracy theories have persisted to this present day. Okay. So those are the 4 presidents, I believe it's 4. Yes, those are the 4 presidents that was assassinated by domestic terrorists. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the assassination attacks, attempts, and plots. And there's a lot of them. Okay, so here we go. 3.5 years after he left the office, Theodore Roosevelt ran in the 1912 presidential election as member of the Progressive Party, while campaigning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on October 14, 1912. John Strack, a saloon keeper from New York who had been stalking him for weeks, shot Roosevelt once in the chest with a .38 caliber Colt Police Positive Special. The 50-page text of his campaign speech titled "Professor Cause Greater Than Any Individual," folded over twice in Roosevelt's breast pocket, and a metal glass case showed the bullet, saving his life. Strank was immediately disarmed, captured, and might have been lynched had Roosevelt had not shouted for Strank to remain unharmed. Roosevelt assured the crowd that he was all right, then ordered the police to take charge of Strank and make sure no violence was done to him. Roosevelt, as an experienced hunter and anatomist, correctly concluded that since he was not coughing blood, the bullet had not reached his lung, and he declined suggestions to go to the hospital immediately. Instead, he delivered his scheduled speech with blood seeping in his shirt, spoke for 84 minutes before completing his speech and accepting medical attention. He opened his comments to gather around here. "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know where you fully understand that I've been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Afterwards, probes and x-rays showed that the bullet had lodged in Roosevelt's chest muscle, but it did not penetrate the purpurary pulmonary. Doctors concluded it would be less dangerous to leave it in place than attempt to remove it, and the bullet remained in Roosevelt's body for the remainder of his life. He spent 2 weeks recuperating before the campaign trail. Despite his tenacity, Roosevelt ultimately lost his bid for re-election to the Democrat candidate Woodrow Wilson. At Strank's trial, the would-be assassination claimed that William McKinley had visited him in a dream and told him to avenge his assassination by killing Roosevelt. He was found legally insane and was institutionalized until his death in 1943. Okay. Andrew Jackson, January 30th, 1835, just outside the Capitol building, a house painter named Richard Lawrence attempted to shoot President Andrew Jackson with 2 pistols both of which misfired. Lady Somebody tried the two pistols and both worked fine. Lawrence was apprehended after Jackson beat him severely with his cane. Lawrence was not guilty by reason of insanity and confined into a mental institution until his death in 1861. Abraham Lincoln, February 23rd, 1865. Abraham Lincoln, February 23rd, 1861. President-elect Lincoln passed through Baltimore amid threats of Baltimore plot, an alleged conspiracy by Confederate sympathizers in Maryland to assassinate Lincoln en route to his inauguration. Allen Pinkerton's National Detective Agency played a role in protecting the president-elect by managing Lincoln's security throughout the journey. Although scholars debate whether the threat was real, Lincoln and his advisors took actions to ensure his safe passage through Baltimore. August 1864, a lone rifle was shot by an unknown sniper, missed Lincoln's head by inches, passing through his hat as he rode the late evening, unguarded, north from the White House 3 miles to the soldier's home, his regular retreat where he would work and sleep before returning to the White House the following morning. Near 11 p.m., Private John W. Nichols of the Pennsylvania 150 Volunteers, the sentry duty at the gated entrance to the soldiers' home grounds, heard the rifle shot and moments later saw the president riding towards him bareheaded. Lincoln described the matter to Wall Layman, his old friend and local bodyguard. William Taft. William Howard Taft and Porfirio Diaz planned to summit in El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, a historic meeting before a U.S. president and a Mexican president, and also the first time an American president will cross the border into Mexico. Diaz requested the meeting to show U.S. support for his planned 8th run as president, and Taft agreed to support Diaz in order to protect the $7 billion of American capital that is invested in Mexico. Both sides agreed that the disputed Chasma Strip connecting El Paso to Ciudad Juarez would be considered neutral territory with no flags present during the summit. But the meeting focused attention on this territory resulted in the assassination threats and other serious concerns. The Texas Rangers, 4,000 U.S. and Mexican troops, the U.S. Secret Service agents, FBI agents, U.S. Marshals will all call in to provide security. In addition, 250-member private security detail led by Frederick Muscle Brunham, the celebrated scout, was hired by John Haynes Hammond. Hammond was a close friend of Taft from Yale University and a former candidate for U.S. Vice President in 1908 presidential election, who along with his business partner Brunham had considerable mining interests in Mexico. On October 16th, the date of the summit, Burnham and Private C.R. Moore, a Texas Ranger, discovered 52-year-old Julius Bergeson holding a concealed palm pistol standing at the Apostle Chamber accomplice along with the procession route. Burnham and Moore captured and disarmed Bergeson with only a few feet of Taft and Diaz. President Taft visited his aunt, Darrell Torrey, in Mulberry, Massachusetts. Torrey later reported receiving a stranger who allegedly overheard an assassination plot in Boston, Massachusetts. Before leaving nearby Worcester, Massachusetts by train, he threatened Torrey, who claimed the stranger did not want anything to get into the papers, and if he did, he would come back to kill me. Torrey reported the plot to the local police, who shared the allegation with the Worcester police and the Secret Service. The man was never identified. Herbert Hoover. November 19, 1928, President-elect Hoover embarked on the 10-nation goodwill tour of Central and South America, While crossing the Andes Mountains from Chile, an assassination plot by Argentine anarchists was thwarted. The group was led by Servino del Giovanni, who planned to blow up his train as it crossed the Argentine Central Plain. The plotters had itinerary, but the bomber was arrested before he could place the explosive on the rails. Hoover professed unconcern, tearing off the front page of a newspaper that revealed the plot and explaining, "It's just as well that Lou shouldn't see it," referring to his wife. His complimentary remarks on Argentina were well received in both the host country and the press. FDR. February 15, 1933, 16 days before Roosevelt's first presidential inauguration, Giuseppe Zangara fired 5 shots at Roosevelt in Miami, Florida. Zangara's shots missed the president-elect, but Zangara did mortally wound Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak and injured 4 other people. Zangara pled guilty to the murder of Cermak and was executed in the electric chair on March 20th, 1933. It never been conclusively determined who was Zangara's target, but most assumed at first he had been shooting at the president-elect. Another theory is that the attempt may have been ordered by the imprisoned Al Capone, and that Cermak, who led a crackdown on the Chicago outfit and Chicago organized crime more generally, was the true target. Soviet NKVD claimed to have discovered a Nazi German Waffen SS plan to assassinate Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin at the Tehran Conference. Mid-1947, during the Jewish insurgency in Palestine before the formation of the State of Israel, the Zionist paramilitary organization Ledi was alleged to send a number of letter bombs addressed to the president and high-ranking staff at the White House. At the time, the incident was not publicized, but Truman's daughter, Margaret Truman, disclosed the alleged incident in her biography of the Truman published in 1972. The allegation was previously disclosed in a memoir by Ira R. T. Smith, who worked in the mailroom. According to Truman, the Secret Service was alerted by British intelligence after similar letters had been sent to high-ranking British officials, and Leahy claimed credit. The mailroom of the White House intercepted the letter intended for President Truman, and the Secret Service diffused them. In November 1st, 1950, 2 Puerto Rican poor independent activists, Oscar Collazo and Crisio Tesosola, Oscar Collazo and Griselo Tesosola, attempted to kill President Truman at the Blair House, where Truman was living while the White House was undergoing major renovations. In the attack, Tesosola injured White House politician Joseph Downs and mortally wounded White House policeman Leslie Coffett. Coffett returned fire, killing Tesosola and with a shot to the head. Collazo wounded an officer before being shot in the stomach. Collazo survived with serious injuries. Coffett died of his wounds 4 hours later in the hospital. Truman was not harmed, but he was placed at huge risk. Collazo was convicted of federal trial and received a death sentence. Truman commuted Collazo's death sentence to life in prison. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter further commuted Collazo's sentence to the time served. December 11th, 1960. While vacationing in Palm Beach, Florida, President-elect John Fitzgerald Kennedy was threatened by Richard Paul Pavlik, 73-year-old former postal worker driven by hatred of Catholics. Pavlik intended to crash dynamite late in 1950 Buick into Kennedy's vehicle, but he changed his mind after seeing Kennedy's wife and daughter bid him goodbye. Pavlik was arrested 3 days later by the Secret Service after being stopped for a driving violation. Police found the dynamite in his car and arrested him. On January 27, 1961, Pavlik was committed to the United States Public Health Service Mental Hospital in Springfield, Missouri. Then he was indicted for threatening Kennedy's life 7 weeks later. Charges against Pavlik was dropped. And on December 2, 1963, 10 days after Kennedy's assassination in Dallas, Judge Emmett Clay Clote ruled that Pavlik was unable to distinguish between right and wrong in his actions, but kept him in the mental hospital. The federal government also dropped charges in August 1964, and Pavlik was eventually released from the New Hampshire State Hospital on December 13, 1966. He died in 1975, age 88. April 13, 1972, Arthur Bremer carried a firearm to motorcycle in Ottawa, Canada, intending to shoot Richard Nixon, but the president's car went too fast for Bremer to get a good shot. The next day, Bremer thought he saw Nixon's car outside Central Park, but it had disappeared by the time he could retrieve his gun from his hotel room. A month later, Bremer instead shot and seriously injured the governor of Alabama, George Wallace, who was paralyzed from the waist down until his death in 1998. The other 3 people were wounded. Bremer served 35 years in prison. In February 22, 1974, Samuel Bick planned to kill Nixon by crashing in a commercial airliner into the White House. He hijacked a DC-9 at Baltimore Washington International Airport after killing a Maryland Aviation Administration police officer, and he was told it could not take off with the wheel box still in place. After he shot both pistols and one later died, an officer named Charles Butch Choyle shot Brooke through the plane's door window. He survived long enough to kill himself by shooting. Gerald Ford. In mid-August 1974, Mikhail Kobogovic, also known as the Alphabet Bomber, said in a message that he was going to come to Washington, D.C. and deliver a nerve gas bomb at President Gerald Ford. Then, just 10 days in his presidency, within 1 day, the CIA, U.S. Service, and all law enforcement agencies, while working out of the White House basement, identified Kobovic. He was arrested on April 20th. The group have identified his Yugoslav origins using the CIA voice analysis of his tapes. With the court records of the cases handled by his first targets, the judge and the police commissioners triangling his identity. September 5th, 1975, on the northern grounds of the California State Capitol, Lynette Sweeky Frum, a follower of Charles Manson, drew a Colt M1911 .45 caliber pistol on Ford when he reached to shake her hand in the crowd. She had 4 cartridges in the pistol's magazine, but none in the firing chamber. As a result, the gun did not fire. She was quickly restrained by Secret Service agent Larry Burmoff. Frum was sentenced to life in prison, but released from custody August 14, 2009, 2 years and 8 months after Ford's death in 2006. September 22, 1975, in San Francisco, California, only 17 days after Frum's attempt, Sarah Jane Moore fired a revolver at Ford from 40 feet, 12 millimeters away. A bystander, Oliver Sipple, grabbed Moore's arm and shot Miss Ford, striking a building wall slightly injuring taxi driver John Lukowitz. Moore was tried and convicted in federal court and was sentenced to prison for life. She was paroled from a federal prison on December 31st, 2007, after serving more than 30 years, 1 year and 5 days after Ford's natural death. The two assassination attempts on Gerald Ford in September 1975 are the only two known cases of women attempting to assassinate an American president. Jimmy Carter, May 5th, 1979. Raymond Lee Harvey was an born unemployed American drifter. He was arrested by the Secret Service after being found carrying a starter pistol with blank rounds 10 minutes before Carter was given a speech at the Civil Center Mall in Los Angeles on May 5, 1979. Harvey had a history of mental illness, but police had to investigate. He claimed he was part of a four-man operation to assassinate the president. According to Harvey, he fired 7 blank rounds from the starter pistol on a hotel roof the night on May 4th to test how much noise it would make. He claimed it had been one of the plotters that night, who he knew was Julio. The man was later identified as 20-year-old illegal immigrant from Mexico, who gave the name Osvaldo Espano Ortiz. At the time of his arrest, Harvey had spent 8 rounds in his pocket, as well as 7 unspent bank rounds for the gun. Harvey was jailed on a $50,000 bond, given his transient status, and Ortiz was ultimately reported as being held on a $100,000 bond as a material witness, or held on a $50,000 bond, being charged with burglary from a car. Charges against the pair were ultimately dismissed for a lack of evidence. John Hinckley Jr. came close to shooting President Carter during his re-election campaign, but lost his nerve. He would later attempt to kill President Ronald Reagan in March 1981. According to Kuwait authorities, FBI investigation, 14 Kuwait and Iraqi men believed to have worked for Saddam Hussein smuggled bombs into Kuwait, planning to assassinate former President Bush by car bomb during a visit to Kuwait University 3 months after he left office in January 1993. The former president was on a visit to Kuwait in 1993 to commemorate the coalition's victory over Iraq in the Persian Gulf War, when Kuwaiti officials claimed to have foiled an alleged assassination plot and arrested the suspects. At the time, former president was accompanied by his wife, 2 of his sons, former Secretary of State James A. Baker III, former Chief of Staff John Sununu, and former Treasury Secretary Nicholas Beatty. One of the 17 people Kuwaiti authorities arrested 2 suspects. Wali Abdullah Ghazali and Red Abdel Amil al-Assad retracted their confessions in trial, claiming they'd been coerced. A Kuwaiti court convicted all but one of the defendants. Then President Bill Clinton responded by launching a cruise missile attack on Iraqi intelligence building in the Mansour district of Baghdad. The plot was used as one of the justifications for the Iraq Revolution, authorizing the 2003 U.S. invasion of the country. The analysis by CIA's Counterterrorism Center concludes that the assassination plot was likely fabricated by Kuwaiti authorities. However, at the time, FBI established that the plot has been directed by the Iraqi intelligence service, and the CIA received information suggesting that Saddam Hussein had authorized the assassination attempt to get revenge against the U.S., to punish Kuwait for working with the U.S., and to keep other Arab states from intervening in Iraq any further. The day before the attack, April 12, 1993, the then U.S. Ambassador to the UN and future 64th U.S. Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, went before the UN Security Council to present evidence of the Iraqi plot with the hope of gaining international support. Okay, here's the assassination attempts on Bill Clinton. January 21st, Ronald Gene Barbater, a retired military officer and freelance writer, plotted to kill Clinton while the president was jogging. Barber returned to Florida a week later without having fired the shots at the president, who was on a state visit to Russia. Barber was sentenced to 5 years in prison and was released in 1998. October 29, 1994, Francisco Martin Duran fired at least 29 shots with a 7.62 39mm Type 56 semi-automatic rifle at the White House of the Friends overlooking North Lawn, thinking that Clinton was among the men in dark suits standing there. Clinton was inside. 3 tourists, Harry Rodesky, Ken Davis, and Robert Haynes, tackled Duran before he injured anyone. Found to have a suicide note in his pocket, Duran was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Osama bin Laden recruiting Razim Yusuf, the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, to attempt to assassinate Clinton. However, Yusuf decided security would be too effective and decided to target Pope John Paul II instead. November 24th, 1996, during his visit to the Asia Pacific Economic Corporation Forum in Manila, Clinton's motorcade was rerouted before it was to drive over a bridge. Secret Service officers had intercepted a message suggesting that an attack was imminent, and Louis Merletti, the director of the Secret Service, ordered the motorcade to be rerouted. An intelligence team leader discovered a bomb under the bridge. Subsequent U.S. investigation revealed that the plot was masterminded by a Saudi terrorist living in Afghanistan named Osama bin Laden. October 2018, a package containing a pipe bomb addressed to his wife Hillary Clinton and sent to their home in Chapua, New York, was intercepted by the Secret Service. It was one of the several mailed to other Democrat leaders in the same week, including former President Barack Obama. Bill Clinton was at the Chapua home when the package was intercepted, while Hillary was in Florida campaigning for the Democrats in the 2018 midterm elections. Fingerprint DNA revealed that the package was sent by Florida resident Caesar Sayoc, was captured 2 days after the package was intercepted. Prosecutors sought a life sentence for Sayoc, but the judge instead sentenced him for 20 years. George W. Bush. May 10, 2005, while President Bush was giving a speech in the Freedom Square in Tivoli, Georgia, Vladimir Artyomyan threw a live Soviet-made RGD-5 hand grenade towards the podium. The grenade had its pin pulled but did not explode because a red tartan handkerchief was tightly around it, preventing the safety lever from detaching. Escaping that day, Artyomyan was arrested in July 2005. During his arrest, he killed an Interior Ministry agent and was convicted in January 2006 and given a life sentence. Shinhad Ahmed Shinhad, an Iraqi citizen and resident of Columbus, Ohio, who was arrested for involvement in a plot to assassinate former President Bush based on information obtained for the conversations he held with several undercover FBI informants. He was also accused of committing an immigration crime and planning to illegally smuggle Iraqi nationals into the U.S. from Mexico in order to assist with the plot. He additionally claimed to the informants that he had direct connections to members of the former ISIS, including once the former ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Before his death, a former ISIS financial chief, the latter whom which intended to launder money from the U.S. via Columbus car dealership, and Friday, Shihab had an informant travel to the Bush home in Dallas and to the George W. Bush Institute to conduct surveillance. Shihab entered the country illegally in September 2020 with false identification. Shihab had claimed to have worked with Iraqi terrorists to kill many American servicemen in Iraq from 2003 to 2006 following the invasion. He stated that the motivation behind the assassination plot was anger over the Iraq war. Here's the assassination attempt on Barack Obama. December 2008, a United States Marine and 20-year-old Cody Ray Binghamton, stationed at Camp Lejeune, wrote that he had taken an oath to protect against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. In a signed letter of intent, he identified President-elect Obama as a domestic enemy and the target of Binghamton's planned assassination plot. A search of his barracks uncovered a journal containing white supremacist material. In June 2010, Binghamton was sentenced to 100 months in federal prison. In 2009, a plot to assassinate Obama at the Alliance of Civilization Summit in Istanbul, Turkey, was discovered after a man's Syrian origins carried forged Al Jazeera TV press credentials was found. The man confessed to the Turkish security services details of his plan to kill Obama with a knife. He alleged he had 3 accomplices. November 2011, 20-year-old Oscar Romero Ortega Hernandez was influenced by conspiracy theorists and fringe religious viewpoints to attempt to murder Obama. Having traveled from his native Idaho, he had hit the White House with several rounds fired from a semi-automatic rifle. No one was injured, but a window was broken. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 2011 to 2012, the far-right terrorist group FAIR plotted to carry out a series of terrorist attacks which included assassinating Obama. The plot was foiled when the 4 members of the group were arrested on murder charges and one, Michael Burnett, agreed to cooperate with authorities in return for a lighter sentence. October 2012, a mentally ill man named Mitchell Cusack of Westminster, Colorado, was arrested after confessing to his therapist that he intended to kill Obama with a shotgun at a campaign stop in Boulder, Colorado. Another attempt was made when a letter laced with the toxin ricin was sent to Obama. 2 white supremacists, Glenda Scott Crawford of Galway, New York, and Eric Freight of Hudson, New York, were arrested to a plot to kill Muslim Americans and other perceived enemies of Israel with a homemade radiation gun described by Crawford as Hiroshima on a light switch. It later emerged that Crawford had suggested using the device against President Obama, as well as several other targets. A package containing a pipe bomb was sent to former President Obama at his home, Washington, D.C. The package was intercepted by the Secret Service. Now, Donald Trump. September 6, 2017, Gregory Lee Langang, 42-year-old man from Bismarck, North Dakota, attempted to assassinate President Trump in Mandan, North Dakota, while Trump was visiting in the state to rally public support. Landing gangs saw the forklift from an oil refinery and drove towards the president motorcade. After the forklift became jammed with the refinery, he fled on foot and was arrested by pursuing police. While interviewed in detention, he admitted that his intent to murder was the president by flipping the presidential limousine with the stolen forklift. To the surprise of the authorities, who suspected he was merely stealing the vehicle for personal use, the man pleaded guilty to the attempted attack, stealing the forklift, relating changes to several other related crimes on the same day. Consequently, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and his defense attorney noted a serious psychiatric crisis. November 2017, a man affiliated with the Islamic State, whose name was not revealed, was arrested by Philippine National Police in Rizal Park, Manila, for reportedly planning to assassinate Trump during the diplomatic ASEAN summit. In the week prior to the fated killing, the Secret Service already suspected a planned assault on the president because of general presence of ICE in the Philippines, and is because of threats many people against the president on social media. Before the landing of Trump's airplane, the Secret Service discovered a credible terrorist threat from a man who threatened to kill the president on social media. Quickly tracking down and arresting the terrorist, the government disclosed the incident to the public after a year of silence in a television documentary. Now, here's the assassination attempts on Joe Biden. On May 23, 2023, Sir Vilisa Kaldu, a 19-year-old man from Chesterfield, Missouri, drove a rented box truck into a barrier that separated the White House from grounds to the public. Shortly thereafter, he was taken into custody by the United States Park Police and was bound to find a Nazi flag in his truck. Kandua expressed admiration for the Third Reich and stated his intentions were to kill the president and seize power. Yeah. All these assassination attempts are crazy, which proves that the assassination attempt on President Trump on July 13th, 2024 is not a hoax. This is an ongoing thing where you have domestic terrorists ever since the days of Andrew Jackson trying to kill the president of the United States because they're trying to make great political change. It's crazy. Something needs to be done about this. I don't know how can this be prevented. I will say is that, even though I probably won't vote for President Trump, this is scary because if President Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris becomes the president of the United States, she can be subjected to assassination attempts too, being that she's a woman of color. You just heard earlier what I said about the assassination attempts on President Obama. Yeah, this is not a hoax. Assassination attempts on presidents is problematic. This is Black Wall Street Chronicles, and I'm Jeffrey Frazier, and I'm signing off. Take care.